I gave Smash characters a new stat-based system that will help players build their character-based game plan against literally everyone. After this video, you'll know exactly what you can do in every matchup you play to help you win more neutral interactions and have a stronger start in any set you play. Number 1, pressure. The way I define pressure is the character's ability to deliver continuous hits long term. Having a high pressure stat will allow for narrower punish windows both on shield and otherwise. Playing a strong pressure game consists of keeping the window for punishes as short as possible between moves you throw out. The best characters in this category will generally be those with the best frame data like Sheik or Fox. Number 2, range. Now this I define a little bit differently, but hopefully it will click for you guys. It's the horizontal gap between the peak distance of a non-projectile move's hitbox and the peak distance of your character's hurtbox, all in the same frame of that move. Why I defined it like this is because of how many moments a character, despite having more reach overall, is still gonna lose if it has to challenge another hurtbox. With this definition, whoever has the biggest gap between the moves they're throwing out is gonna have priority if these two attacks were to collide. This becomes even more important to know, especially if one of those moves linger, like Link's Nair. Number 3, coverage. Very similar to range, but rather focusing on the horizontal gap, it focuses on the vertical gap instead, still focused on non-projectile attacks. Like range, the larger gap will usually have priority. However, its utility comes more in the form of juggling and landing. The best anti-airs and landing options both have big gaps. So between range and coverage, there's also another critical usage between these stats, and that's the way you cover approach options. It's good to remember that range is better suited on the quality of covering approach options, so more in one precise direction, while coverage is focused on the quantity of approach options, or more possible approach options. A combination of both range and coverage will allow for some very hard to compete with attacks. Number 4, speed. Onto a pretty self-explanatory stat, where it's essentially just how fast a character can move. In terms of usage, higher speed will allow you to approach with an unreactable attack from a further distance, especially when combined with a fast startup attack. While aerial speed is used quite a bit differently than grounded speed, the concept of attacking unreactably quicker is still the same. Grounded speed is good when you have the opening to actually run on the ground, while aerial speed allows for several other approach mix-ups, but for most characters way less faster and no access to shields. Number 5, mobility. This basically describes the turnaround ability of a character, or how fast they can move back and forth. Benefit of high mobility will, like pressure, reduce the punish window the opponent has on your attacks. For high grounded mobility, it will often depend on the character's skid and how many frames their dash takes. Aerial mobility is in the form of air acceleration. Between pressure and mobility, either one can do its job better depending on what it's used for. For pressure, it will generally serve better as a way of approaching or taking back stage control, while mobility is better for staying back or maintaining stage control. Number 6, distance. These next two are mainly gonna be projectile focused, which means there's a chance a lot of characters will be tied in 0 for these next two stats. Distance is basically the exact same definition as range, but is rather focused on projectiles or moves with abnormal range compared to the rest of their movesets only. Higher distance will often make for better zoning purposes. Number 7, altitude, the same as coverage but only counts projectiles or moves with abnormal coverage, also compared to the rest of their moveset. More altitude means more trapping capabilities, which can allow for slightly more aggression than zoning, but still overall quite passive. Number 8, Pancake. Last but not least is the Pancake stat. This one measures the stat of a character's hurt box, with a high Pancake stat usually being the smaller characters. In addition to that, any moves the character has that can shift their hurt box enough to avoid attacks differently is also taken into account. With a higher Pancake, this makes your character harder to hit, which has a lot of perks on its own. And those are all the stats that I have. Now, wouldn't it just be easier if I just gave you all of the numbers of these stats? Well, this is where I encourage you to not just beg for all the data scrap, which will just get outdated later on anyways, and find them out for yourself. So that way, you can edit it based on your own experience and findings for each character. Not sure where to start? Well, start with who you main. You know them better than everyone else in the roster most likely, so try to answer this. In comparison to the rest of the cast, on a scale of 1 to 100, where would I put them? Do this starting with your main, and as you play games, have whatever you're using to keep track of this data and record the data based on your experience and findings with every character you go up against. If you're serious enough to do this, you'll be at a massive advantage compared to most players. Now, is this the only stuff I should be taking into account for every character I fight? No, there's still advantage and disadvantage. What stages are best, what their blind spot is, what character specific mechanics they have, what's punishable on block or with, a whole buttload of stuff, which is why it's impossible to put it all together piece by piece unless you learn to do it and keep track of it yourself. However, because you made it to the end, I'm willing to share with you guys my personal data and findings on every matchup I've actually bothered to put data right up here. If you guys are interested in more creative training in Smash Bros, pound that like button and mash the subscribe button, and I will see you guys in the next video. Let's roll out.